Well, we just had another axle go fucking nuclear. So, that's the second one this weekend. Which means it's time to tell you about a little bit of the lore of this place. Found all these marks on the wall. See these? This is every time the mechanics do something that they don't enjoy. There, I've done my mark. Fuck these axles. That was 3 days ago in the IMS garages. Honestly, I'm still kind of on a high. I can't believe that happened, that I was able to race at IMS. And then on top of that, what you guys haven't heard of yet is on Sunday, we actually won our class. Now, it was Class EC in Champ Car, which is kind of just a hodgepodge of cars. There wasn't that many competitors, but still, I won at IMS. I crossed the Brickyard, took the checkered in first place in my class. That's just... I can't believe it. I had so much fun. The other thing, too, is when I went to IMS, I kind of looked at the track map, and honestly, it kind of looks boring. I was looking at it, and it's like, okay, this is a track, that's over 100 years old. I have to do it. It's got such a big name. I have to do it. It'll probably be kind of boring, but it'll still be a weekend at the races, and it'll be a good time. I'll have some pictures I'll be able to share, with my kids for the rest of my life and whoever will listen. But here's the truth. IMS is a ridiculously tough track. It's ridiculous. So you look at it and no individual corner on it really looks hard. But how do you explain this? So there's no individual corner here that's really hard. There's, what is that, like 13 or 14. The one just before pit in, that one is actually... it's a hairpin, and it's kind of narrow, and it's kind of tricky, but really that's not it. What makes the track tricky is all of the corners are chained together. You never get a break. How you take one corner immediately affects how you take the next corner, immediately affects how you take the next corner, and you do that from the front straight to the back straight, and then after you leave the back straight, you have that again. You've got, the corner 12, which we'll talk about more in a second. And then you just chain all these corners, and then you're just trying to accelerate. Each one of those corners, you're just trying to optimize your front straight speed so that you can get the best lap time possible. It was intense. If I ever get the opportunity to do it again, I'm doing it again. If you guys get the opportunity, do it. It doesn't matter how much it costs. Just do it. Anyways, but let's take a little bit of a look at what happened over the weekend. So here you can see, over here, this is me changing an axle. That was Saturday. I was able to do it pretty quick. I changed the axle on the left side of the car, and unfortunately, after I got that back down, I realized the boot on the right side of the car was actually having a failure also. It had just barely started spitting grease. So that's bad news, right? Because it was like 3 hours into 20 hours worth of racing, and I only had 2 sets of axles. That's a problem. But what we got out of that, when we stopped for that axle, we got a really good clue about the right side, because the balloon was actually... The balloon... The CV boot was acting like a balloon. And that actually led me to the realization. I remember seeing somebody talk about this, so I added these zip ties, and more importantly, I added a vent. You can see there's a vent right here. Okay, the other one's been pulled out. It's right here. To vent the boots. Now, that made all the difference. We still had that failure. As you can see, there was a vent in there, but the interesting thing is, if you look at this vent, you can see it's there, but I screwed up. I didn't make it come out on the other side. So that's why this joint just kind of went nuclear, and you can see how the splines are all folded over and everything. what that's actually telling me, it's interesting, is the grease that we put in here, the new grease that I was told, that GKN stuff, it's actually letting this joint actually still be lubricated as it's getting hotter and hotter. So the meltdown temperature is even hotter than it was before, which is fine. That's actually kind of what we want. Now, if we can just keep the grease inside the joint, we'll be even better off. So I think with this solution here, especially if I make it long enough, and that grease, I think this is solved. Also, we had no inner CV failure. This one's pulled apart just so I can inspect it, but you can see the grease in there is still good. It's still very much, feels like grease, and we're good. So I'm not saying I'm completely done with axle problems, but I think I'm in a much better place than I was before. Previously, it would take us, an entire weekend or 2 weekends of racing to destroy an axle. The fact that we destroyed we destroyed both in 3 hours at IMS. And then the next day, we didn't have a single right side failure. Now, we did have this failure on the left side, but as we can see, we know exactly why. And the other thing that's the clue here is, so this is the part that goes over here. This is all brittle here. You can see it just kind of cracks and falls apart. But over here, this is all soft. What that says is this actually ripped off because it caught on a suspension piece from inflating before it went, just meltdown. And speaking of meltdown, yeah, look at this. You can see from the side here, we almost used, not only did we use all the pad, we used almost all the metal. These are Wilwood BP20 pads. Normally they last us like 5 races or so. IMS, it's just more abuse on everything. And this was the front right. Now, I don't know why the front right heated up so much more than all the other 3 positions. There's probably just something slightly different in the underbody. This car doesn't have all of its underbody panels, so it probably got a little bit less cooling and it just got hotter. So I'll have to, right now I don't even have any cooling vents. I'll have to add some cooling vents. I just haven't needed them until now. And you can see, most of you probably saw this, but there's a video here of a couple laps. Now, that was done by Ryan Lewis. The team that we were there with actually they convinced Ryan Lewis to show up and drive, and their car wasn't working on Saturday, so we actually shoved him into this thing, and he put some laps down, about 2-minute flat, which was great. My best lap time was a 2-minute, I think I hit 2-minute 10. I definitely hit 2-minute 11 at least a couple times, and I'm pretty sure I hit 2-minute 10. So he had 10 seconds on me. Now, to be frank, I'm much better at building the cars than I'm at driving the cars. Obviously, I really enjoy driving the cars, but building is my strong suit. And then again, so here, take a look here at corner 12. You can see here corner 12 on the map. It's just this super long sweeper. And take a look. This is with Ryan driving. You can see that speed. It's about 95 miles an hour or so on the corner exit. It's just insane. And what that ended up doing, that ended up putting enough stress that we actually ripped the sway bar off of the rear sway bar off of the right side of the car. You can actually kind of see. I don't know. Maybe you can see it. Yeah. Either way. It's probably too dark under there. But what that meant, so check this out. This is all of Saturday. And unfortunately, this right here, this tire depth here is almost brand new. And this on the outside, so you can see the wheel, is corded. So this was all of Saturday. And that included with a pro driving, and we told him to push it. Feel free to push the car as hard as he wanted. And when the sway bar failed, this was the state of the tire after about 2 hours of sway bar failure. This is not just touching the cords. There are no more cords over here. Like if you go here further, you can see the cords extend further. The tire is actually ballooning out because the cords are gone. Obviously, we caught this a little bit too late, but we did replace it in time. It's still holding air, but really a little bit too close for comfort. And this, so about 2 hours of driving, and that's just crazy. But if you look at the telemetry, previously at other races, we were leaning by like about 5 degrees at absolute most, and that's like at Barber on turn 1, where you just absolutely launch it into this dip, and there's camber's on your side, gravity's on your side, and you manage to pull like a 1.6 G turn in this thing. Yeah, in this thing. Because all the other conditions are just right for it. And even then, we're getting about 5 degrees of body roll. And the tire wear is pretty even. At IMS on turn 12, the telemetry is consistently showing 7 and sometimes even 8 degrees of body roll, which is like, it's crazy. How is that even more stressful than at Barber with 1.6 Gs of turning? It's crazy. I mean, yes, I understand how it works, but it's still like that instinctual. It just doesn't work like that. So obviously this car just didn't have enough sway bar for IMS. If I ever return, and if I ever have an opportunity, I will return, it's going to need more sway bar for that. And frankly, if I'm going to put more sway bar for that, it might as well get more sway bar for all the races, because if we can reduce that 5 degrees down even less, we'll get a bit more traction because the tires will stay flatter on the road. Anyways, then other than that, speaking of melting down, check out these brakes. So this was on Sunday, and actually this ended up highlighting something really cool about Champ Car, something that I knew, I had seen it on paper, but I didn't really realize what it meant. So when I race 24 Hours of Lemons, if I have a mechanical like, this shaft or those brakes or whatnot, that's pretty much it for the weekend, right? Like, we could totally fix it. We can go back on the track. We can have an absolute blast, and it's fun. And what we do when that happens is we also shorten our stints, because frankly, when you're driving, the first hour is an absolute blast, and the next half hour is still a lot of fun, but it's not quite as much fun. And then after about an hour and a half, this is going to feel weird saying this, but it becomes kind of a slog. Not so much that I don't want to do it, don't get me wrong, but it does become a slog. If I could cut my driving time into, hour to hour and a half chunks, that would be great. Everybody would just have a much better time, and because we're doing proper pits in Champ Car, that means stuff like this. Like, I can fix this. This took 4 minutes. I was able to put new pads in the front right and send the driver right back out. In fact, because there's so little penalty to pitting, what I did, we had just put the driver in the car, and I noticed this, and I didn't quite have the tools ready for me because I wasn't expecting that. So what I did, I took Mike and I told him, go do 2 laps. I think I said something like, try to only barely hit triple-digit speeds, because on the front straight we're actually hitting up to 125. So yeah, exactly. I told the guy, you don't have any front right brakes, only do 100. But anyways, I did 2 laps, then came back in, and by then I had biked to our garage, and I was able to come back, and I had all the tools, and I serviced this thing in 4 minutes, and we didn't have to get the driver out, we didn't have to, just none of that. We just able to do it right there. And the pits are penalized so little that, we were able to change drivers. We won on Sunday, and we probably had, 7 or 8 pits. It just doesn't matter. Yeah, they've got that 5-minute minimum on the pit, but frankly, even if you're being quick in Lemons, because of the way they do the fueling and then the driver change, it takes 8 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and also they don't count the pit loop. So when you cross the start-finish line in the pit, they don't count that as a lap. So really in Lemons, a pit is an entire way around the track, and then you come in, you have to go drive into the paddock, you have to do whatever you're going to do, and then you go back out, and then you go another way around before you cross the start-finish line again. And that just kills, right? Because you've got, depending on the track, 4 to 4.5 minutes worth of circulating there, plus the time in the pits. Add that all together, and, it's just... I gotta say, I'm still not convinced if it's Champ Car or Lemons that I'm going to prioritize, but Champ Car does pits a hell of a lot better. And yeah, in Lemons, when you're in the pits, you actually have a higher, top speed. It actually varies from track to track, but usually they say about 45 miles an hour. And in Champ Car, you're only allowed to do 20 miles an hour in the pits. And the reason for that is because there's people out there without safety equipment. If you're not fueling, you can be dressed like this and servicing the car, which makes sense, right? Because your suit costs a lot of money. And if you're going to, just touching this stuff, right, I'm already greasy. If you're going to do this to your suit's going to last a year. And now you're going to be, every year, you're going to be spending $600 to $800 on a new suit. Now, does that mean they should be doing, I don't know. That's a big debate. I don't know. The point is, that's the way they do it. And they make it safer by doing 20 miles an hour, which really allowed us to do lower, shorter stints, and a mechanical just didn't take us out of the race. So, yeah, on Sunday we were racing hard against an S2000. It was actually doing slightly better average laps than we were, and I think even their best lap was actually even better than Ryan Lewis's best lap by, I think, 2 seconds. I think they did a 1:58. Honestly, I'd have to go look it up. So, other than that, the drivetrain, well, other than this parts of the drivetrain, no issues, right? The engine, frankly, ever since I figured out to run Klotz oil, we haven't had a single engine issue. We're running the here, Klotz right here. We're running their oil also in the transmission, and no issues. And in fact, on Sunday, when I did the axle swap, I actually forgot to refill the transmission because he came in on the tow truck, and I was able to get this axle out and the other one back in, I think it was 12 minutes. A whole axle change, 12 minutes. And that's what allowed us to actually stay in the running, Anyways, Indy, just an absolute blast. And obviously, that video that I just released, you guys really enjoyed it, based on the view counts and whatnot. So I'm going to try to put a bigger video together with more of the stuff there. Now, unfortunately, the GoPro, I bought a GoPro 8 just before the race because I really wanted to kind of immortalize that footage. What I didn't account for is this guy, unfortunately, the GoPro software this captures accelerations, and it's supposed to capture GPS, but it didn't, unfortunately. But it did capture accelerations, but their software doesn't allow me to overlay it because it doesn't support the GoPro 8 yet. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm going to try to get that figured out. I will release a video whether or not I get that data overlaid, because with the camera angle that I had there, you can see, you can see the pedals, you can see the front, you can see the rear view. It's a pretty wonderful angle. I'm pretty happy with it, even if we can't overlay any extra data. So, I'll release that. The other thing is, I had a video about halfway done with the prep of this car, and one of the big things I was talking about in that video is these axles. And frankly, I kind of covered a couple things here. I learned I don't want to release that video because I want to actually fix this thing properly to where I just don't want to tell you the wrong thing and then put a correction after in the video. I'll just make a video. What I want to do is actually take the right axle on this. I want to pull it out. That ran an entire day of IMS without any issues, as far as I know. And that's going to be what I'm going to use for confirmation. If that thing looks spotless and the grease still feels like grease, I'm going to call that solution solved, right? Because if it can last in 10 hours at IMS, it'll last Barber, it'll last Gingerman. It's just not going to give us any issues. That doesn't mean I'm not going to carry spares anymore, but it should be solved. The other thing, again, with just everything heating up so much more, we didn't actually have any transmission issues, but I've got this part that I've been working on. This is to be able to add a transcooler to the EB series transmission. It's just a 3D printed part, but it bolts onto the drain port on the transmission. I forget exactly, whatever. There'll be a video on this eventually. And then the idea is it puts pressurized oil out here. You can run it through a cooler and then put it back in the transmission somewhere. And I'm debating probably putting it right back in the transmission on the outer input shaft bearing so that stays the absolute coolest in the transmission, which is the only part in this transmission that consistently has issues. Now, I actually haven't had any failures with it, but many people do have failures. I think maybe the failures are more on the street than on the track. I don't know fully what the failure mode is. But if I got to put it back in somewhere, and I know that that's a weak point, why not put it back in there? So anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. There's going to be an axle video, and there's going to be more lap videos, and here's a few more laps for you guys to enjoy on the way out. Have a good day.